You are listening to the Navigating Adult ADHD podcast with your ADHD coach and expert, Zena. Hello, my friend. Happy Tuesday, or whatever day you're listening. I record this so that it comes out on a Tuesday, but happy whatever day it is, okay? We're going to roll with it. Today we are going to talk about one of my favorite topics, and that is having your own back. That is something I am so fucking passionate about, and I love to talk about this, coach on it, teach on it, all the things. So I'm very excited for this episode today, and I hope you are too. And if you pushed play, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for choosing this podcast. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, and I am so glad that you are here today. All right, let's dive in. Now, before we talk about having your own back, I have something very exciting to share with you, okay? And that is that the Navigating Adult ADHD membership is opening again in just 1 week's time, if you're listening to this in real time. We're opening the doors on Tuesday, the 10th of June, 2025. And if there is one thing I have learned about, managing your ADHD, it is this. Having your own back changes everything, right? When you are stuck in a cycle of overwhelm and self-doubt and that, never-ending feeling like you're just never doing enough, when you're beating yourself up for not being consistent or for forgetting something again, right? When you feel like no one else around you really gets how hard it can be to have ADHD or to be inside your brain, that's when you need support the most, right? That's when you need a space where you feel seen, heard, understood, and empowered. And that is exactly what this membership is. It is a place to build the kind of relationship with yourself where you have your own back, right? Not because you've suddenly figured it all out, right? But because you finally got the tools, you've got the support, you've got the people in your corner. So inside Navigating Adult ADHD, the membership, we focus on things like emotional regulation because emotions run high for ADHDers, right? And we never learned that skill. We focus on things like mindset and self-talk, right? So you can stop being your own worst critic, right? Stop treating yourself like an asshole. We focus on things like dopamine and motivation, right? Working with your brain, right? And we also give you a lot of coaching. Right? I coach you and help you to move forward without shame, without burning out. So I want you to think about this. What if this was the moment that you decided to start having your own back for real, right? Not just promising yourself that tomorrow will be different. God, the amount of times I used to say that, right? Not just, downloading another freebie or saving another post or podcast to come back to, but actually doing the thing, right? So if this podcast has helped you, right? If you've been listening for a little while, I want you to imagine what is possible when we do this together. So again, doors open on Tuesday, the 10th of June. You can join the waitlist right now over at navigatingadultadhd.com/membership. I'm going to put the link in the show notes so that you are the first to know when we go live. You also get early access and you get some incredible bonuses when you join that waitlist. Okay? So my friend, let's get into it. What would your life be like? What would you be able to do or create? How would you feel if you had your own back? This is something that I have been practicing now for years. And it has helped me to achieve some incredible things in my life, such as traveling solo. I spent 6 months in South and Central America. I even hosted trips and retreats and started like a solo travel community that went viral, right? I have started my own business, right? I, became quite successful. I laugh when I say that because I'm still adapting to, owning my success. Right? I just had something else happen the other day that was wild to me. Something I couldn't have even imagined. Something like that I feel very proud of. And I'm not sharing it yet. But it's like, owning that in a country in New Zealand where, we're taught to be humble, it can be a little difficult. Right? So again, It's one of the ways I've had my own back, and one of the ways I continue to do it is owning that success, right? I've also done things like overcome my fear of speaking in public, right? You guys hear me talk on the podcast, and if you meet me in person, and like I'm pretty outgoing, what have you, but like I used to be fucking terrified of standing up and speaking in front of people, and now I speak to audiences of like up to 1,000 people. It's wild to me, right? I was that kid who would go bright red, even the adult who would go bright red and want to cry, right? So not only has having my own back helped me to do and create incredible things, it has also helped me to feel safe when I do scary, hard, uncertain things, right? It's that inner knowing that I will be okay no matter what. I have got me. But I haven't always had my own back, okay? Now, if you've been listening to the podcast for a while, you probably know some of my story. So let me share it. Let me reshare it. I'm going to tell it a little different for you today. I thought, a number of years ago now, I thought that moving to London would make me happy, right? I thought that moving to London was going to make me happy and successful, like this confident, well put together woman that I had always wanted to be. Instead, I basically landed in my nightmare. I hated my job. I hated the cold, dark, wet, grey, rainy city. I fell out with the one friend who I'd moved over there to be with, and I was living with her, right? I was drowning in debt, so far in debt. I was homesick and fucking miserable. And then one day I found myself in the doctor's office asking, practically begging, for weight loss pills, right? I truly believed that if I could just lose this weight, all this extra weight I was holding at the time, then I would feel better. Then I would finally feel like I am enough, like I would be good enough then. Even though I'd been there and done that, I had lost all of the weight. It got down to this ridiculously skinny weight only like a year or so before. And yet I'd still never felt good enough at that weight, right? And the doctor, fortunately, she saw right through me, right? And instead of giving me the pills, she prescribed me life coaching sessions. Now, back in 2014 this was, okay? So back in 2014, nobody knew what a life coach was. And the idea of it was something that I really thought was like some woo-woo nonsense for rich people with too much time on their hands. Right? But I went along because at that stage I had nothing to lose. Nothing. I was so miserable. I was like, I'm just going to try anything. Right? And in that first session, she asked me some questions that like cracked me open, I think is the best way to put it. Like, you know, were awful and painful and so good at the same time. Right? Questions like, whose approval are you really trying to get here? And why? What does it take for somebody to actually be good enough? Who gets to decide what good enough is? And I remember going home on the train that night. I was on the tube and I was just staring at the black window as we're going through the tunnels. And that was when I realized, you know, not only did I not have my own back, I was actually treating myself worse than I had ever treated another human being, right? And what I've learned since then is this. Every happy, successful, fulfilled person that I have ever met has one thing in common. They have their own back. So today I want to share what that actually means, what that looks like, right? Especially when you have ADHD. And I want to talk about the 4 C's, the 4 things that make it possible, right? Like the recipe, let's say. So I want to start by saying like having ADHD can be really hard, right? We know that. And it can make having your own back a challenge. Because our brains, they are wired for rejection, RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria. Wired to want to avoid that, of course, right? We can be super impulsive. We can overthink. We've also spent years abandoning ourselves to meet other people's expectations. Okay? We've spent years trying to live up to neurotypical standards and be neurotypical. And again, we abandon ourselves. Right? We often get stuck in all or nothing thinking. And we think, you know, if we mess something up, well, then we're terrible and awful and like we're the worst, right? So this idea of like learning to have your own back, that right there, my friend, is a game changer. And I also want to say this isn't something like you're either born with or without, right? Like it's not. It's a skill, right? It's a skill that you learn and practice. Often what I see with other adults with ADHD is that we're really good at doing this for other people that we love and care about, right? Like we've got their back. But when it comes to doing it for ourselves, that is where we might be missing the mark. But the good news is if we can do this for somebody else in our life, whether it be our best friend or our children or our partner or our coworker, right? When we have their back, when we advocate for them, when we support them and cheer them on, we can also do that for ourselves. We're just turning what we're focusing out, we're just turning it in. That's it. Okay? So for me, knowing that I have my own back really does allow me to slow down and enjoy my life. Okay? To stop rushing all the time and just being busy. It allows me to take bigger and bigger risks, right? It gives me the courage to go after what I want. Now, I'm going to share an example with you because we need the examples, right? That's how we put the words to the picture. I want to do a TED talk, right? Like I want to do a TEDx talk, and I believe that I've got an idea worth sharing, okay? And I've mentioned it before here on the pod. And while I still get nervous and sometimes I get anxious before speaking in front of like a large crowd, and like the idea of it being recorded is like terrifying, right? This is still a life goal for me. Right? I want to do a TED talk. And this has been a goal that I've had for a little while now. So last year I applied not once, but twice to 2 different TEDx organizers here in New Zealand. I applied to be a speaker and I was rejected both times. Now, did RSD kick my ass? Did that rejection, did it hurt? Did I feel disappointed and upset? Hell yes, I did. Right? It was hard. It was really terrible both times. But I did not give up, and I will not give up, right? And I expect that as I keep applying, I'm going to get more rejections. That is likely, and it's going to hurt again, right? I might also need to work with a TEDx coach. I might need to invest in some support, some help to achieve this goal that I have. But that's what it looks like when you have your own back, right? You don't beat yourself up for the failures. You don't beat yourself up for the setbacks, for the knockbacks, for the no's, right? You support yourself. You speak to yourself like you would a friend. You cheer yourself on. You pick yourself up off the ground and you go again, right? So, my friend, what does it actually take to have your own back? How do you do it, right? I'm going to share with you the recipe, right? It has 4 ingredients and conveniently they all start with the letter C, okay? Now, I want you to visualize a table that has got 4 very strong, sturdy legs, right, to stand and hold the top of the table, right? Now, if one of those 4 legs is weak or it's missing, what happens? The whole thing wobbles, okay? So having your own back is made up of these 4 C's, these 4 legs of our table. The first one is choice, then we have courage, then we have compassion, and lastly, we have curiosity. So we're going to go through them one by one. Choice is saying, I choose to show up for myself, right? Even when I mess up, even when shit hits the fan, even when I want to hide, right? When you forget the lunch date with your friend, or, you get nothing done today on your to-do list, you can still choose to not beat yourself up for that. Do you apologize to your friend? Sure, of course you do, right? But you don't have to beat yourself up. You can choose how you respond to and treat yourself, right? You always have choice. Choice is power. Choice is what puts you back in the driver's seat. So an example of this, we actually recently discussed this inside the membership, and we were talking about friendships. I'm about to do a class actually in the membership on relationships, and if you join this round, you get access to all previous classes, right? But we were talking about friendships, and when you've been MIA for a while and, you haven't replied to your friends, haven't reached out, haven't connected, and now you're really worried that if you do reach out and try to reconnect, they probably will reject you or ignore you, right? You have a choice, right? Do you choose to take courageous action and reach out? Or do you choose not to and instead create more distance between you and your friends? Right? This is the question I always come back to. Which choice moves you in the direction you want to go? Right? The decision to reach out is scary, right? The decision to reconnect after you haven't, spoken to your friends and maybe you've not replied to some messages or what have you. That decision to reach out, yes, it is scary, but it is most likely going to create the very thing that you want, which is reconnection with your friends. Right? The decision to avoid doing that is easier because you don't have to do anything, but it is guaranteed to create the very thing you don't want, which is feeling rejected. Right? We always have a choice, and I love to ask myself that question. Which choice moves me in the direction that I want to go? And that leads to number 2, which is courage, right? Taking courageous action, right? Because back to that friendship example, it requires courage to reach out again after you have, maybe spent a couple of months like ignoring your friends and not seeing them and replying. Like, it's courageous. It's going to be hard and scary. That's what courage is. Courage is doing the hard thing that serves your future self, not just your now self, right? So that could be saying no when your people pleaser is screaming yes. Maybe your boss says, hey, can I give you some extra work to do because, we're short-staffed at the moment. And that might be, actually, no, I can't take that on right now. I'm already at capacity, right? When it's so much easier to be like, okay, right? It might look like sending the email or speaking up, right? For yourself or for someone else, even when that, your chest is pounding and you're so worried about being rejected or criticized, right? It's about doing the thing scared, not waiting until you feel ready. That's what courage is, right? Courage, I always say, courage feels like ass when you're couraging. When you're in it, when you're using it, right? It feels like ass, but it produces incredible things in our lives, right? So some examples from my life, public speaking. I had to take myself to Toastmasters. I think I've been going about 5 or 6 years now, but I had to take myself there. The first time I stood up to speak in this room of maybe like 20, 25 people, I stood up for like 20 seconds. I wouldn't go to the front. I stood up at my seat, and they encourage you to go up to like the lectern to like, the front stage area. I stood up on my seat, and within 20 seconds, I was like sitting back down as fast as I could. And then in my brain, I was like, fuck, that was terrible. That was awful. Why are we doing this? Rah! Right? But I kept going and going and going. And eventually I started to say to myself, hey, you're doing so amazing. I'm so glad you came. Keep doing this. You're getting better. I promise it's going to get easier, right? So courageous action again for me looked like dating after being 10 years single and fucking terrified of dating, right? Especially with RSD, dating can be a terrifying thing, right? Right? Courage was starting my own business, leaving the security of my 9-to-5 job. Courage was traveling solo to countries where people told me I should not travel solo to. Right? One of those was Rio or, a lot of South and Central America, to be fair, right? I've traveled to so many places solo, even in Europe and throughout Asia and stuff like that. And people always are like, oh, you're doing that on your own, right? Or another reaction is like, wow, that's so brave, right? Yeah, it does. It takes courage to do that, right? I never felt ready in all of those things, right? But courage, taking courageous action is what moves me towards the future I want. So number 3 is compassion, right? Compassion is the soft landing, right? You cannot have your own back if you're going to throw yourself under the bus every time you mess up, right? Because here's the thing, humans mess up, right? ADHD humans, we mess up, my friend, right? Doesn't mean we got to beat the shit out of ourselves, right? In fact, it's the opposite, right? There is this kind of belief that so many of us have, and I've worked through this one over the years where I have to beat myself into it. I have to be hard on myself or otherwise I'd never get it done, right? And it's actually, no, the opposite is true, right? You need to better understand yourself and be considerate and compassionate and curious and kind with yourself. And then you can actually get it done, right? You don't have to beat yourself into it. There is another way. It's just that you're unfamiliar with that way because nobody else taught you that, right? So compassion, right? Having compassion when you miss a deadline, when you don't stick to your routine, right? When you're, in a shame spiral and beating yourself up. Compassion is how you stop the spiral. It's how you get back up. So for example, when I got that very first TEDx rejection letter, right, I was gutted, right? My brain tried to tell me, I remember this, my brain was like, maybe you don't have what it takes, right? And that's a slippery slope because I could have gone down that slope, right? And been like, yeah, I suck. I'm never going to figure this out. I can't do it, blah, 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 right? But instead I chose compassion. I chose to acknowledge, this fucking sucks, right? This hurts. I let myself have all of my feelings. Of course I feel disappointed, right? And that's what I told myself. Of course I feel this way. Rejection is hard. It makes sense that I feel this way. It's okay to feel this way, even though it sucks. And after a couple of days of being super kind to myself, I was ready to get back up and go again, right? Compassion is like what I think of as creating safety inside of myself, right? Compassion is creating my own self-safety, kind of like a soft place to land. And then we have curiosity, right? This is what ties it all together. It's the lens that you bring to yourself, right? Instead of being like, well, what's wrong with me? It's like, okay, what's going on here? Why does this keep happening? What's happening for me? Right? What am I experiencing? What am I feeling? It's instead of judging yourself, you're exploring, right? Instead of approaching yourself like, you're a fuck up and a failure, right? You're like approaching yourself like a scientist. Ooh, I wonder why this does this and what happens when we try this? Ooh, oh, that's fascinating. What about this, right? Like seek to learn, grow, right? ADHD is we often default to criticism, right? Criticizing ourselves especially, right? Like curiosity though invites reflection, invites growth and learning without the shame, right? There is no judgment in curiosity. I'm going to say that again. There is no judgment in curiosity. So when we are being curious, right, we're not judging ourselves. And that is where real change happens, when we stay open to being curious, right? And often we are naturally kind of fascinated people, because we get a lot of dopamine from ooh, what does that do? What's that? Ooh, learning, we love that. And we can also adapt that skill towards ourselves and being curious and learning from ourselves, right? So curiosity for me often looks like being kind of playful and asking a lot of questions from a very compassionate place. Like, why did I sleep in this morning when I said I was going to get up at 6 a.m.? What's going on? Or some of the questions I love to ask, how can I make this more simple for myself? How can I make this easier? How can I make this more fun? Right? What could I learn from this? What is the lesson in this for me? What could I take away from this? How could I approach this different next time? Right? So, coming back to the table, right? The 4 strong legs that hold up our table, right? For having our own back. They're made up of those 4 C's: choice, courage, compassion, and curiosity. So the next time you question how to have your own back, I want you to check in with these 4 C's. Am I being compassionate with myself? What would it look like if I was to do that? And if you struggle to focus on yourself, think about, if this was my best friend, if this was my child, if this was somebody else I love and care about, how would I be compassionate to them? What might I say? And is it going to feel weird at first? Yes. Does that mean it's wrong? No. It just means you're doing something you're not used to doing yet. Stick with it. Right? So that was the first one. Am I being compassionate with myself? What would that look like? And then what choice am I making? Right? And is this the choice I want to be making? Right? Is this the choice that moves me towards the outcome I want? And what is the courageous thing to do here? What would courage look like? Right? And again, what would it look like to get curious? How could I apply curiosity to this? So my friend, if you take nothing else away from this today, let it be this. You do not need to be perfect. You do not need to get everything right every single fucking time. No, you just need to keep coming back to how can I have my own back, right? Having your own back means that you show up for yourself again and again with kindness, with courage, with curiosity, and with the power to choose what's right for you, not just what's easy or what's expected, okay? Because the truth is, life with ADHD can feel like a constant game of catch-up sometimes. But when you have your own back, you're no longer like running against yourself, fighting against yourself, right? You become your own safe space, right? You can become your own like teammate, your own guide. I know that sounds a little bit woo-woo, but I promise it's fucking worth it, right? And the Navigating Adult ADHD membership, that is where we practice having your own back together, right? This is not just about, managing the symptoms. It's about building the kind of relationship with yourself where you no longer abandon yourself anymore, right? So if today's episode has landed, if you are ready to stop beating yourself up and start backing yourself instead, then go get your name on the wait list, my friend. Okay, doors open Tuesday, June 10th. When you join the waitlist, you get early access, you get a front row seat and exclusive bonuses. So head to navigatingadultadhd.com/membership. The link is in the show notes. And I'm going to leave you with one last question. What is one way that you can have your own back today? It doesn't have to be huge. Right? It might be tiny. It can be anything. Maybe it's the way in which you speak to yourself. Maybe you stop speaking to yourself like an asshole today. Maybe just call that out, right? Maybe it's the choice that you make. Whatever it is, I hope you choose you because you deserve it. All right. Huge love, my friend. I'll speak to you soon. Hey friend, if you want some more help navigating and thriving with ADHD and some help applying everything that you're learning here on the podcast, then head over to our website, navigatingadultadhd.com.